What is up, True Crime World? You're here with Luminal on the Wall. I'm Becky.
And I'm Bevy. And today's case is about a young girl who befriends two young guys who had malicious intentions and unfortunately led to a scene straight out of a horror film. This is the case of Cassie Jo Stoddart. Listeners' discretion is advised.
Hello to all our LOTW friends and family.
Yeah, hey guys.
Yes. Oh, and hey Bev across the river there.
Hello. How are you?
I'm fine. Just kidding.
I was pretending we were in a valley.
No, I got what
You're
you're saying.
decently far. Hold my hand. We can't reach.
We can't reach.
Because we're in a valley.
We're in a valley.
It's a valley.
So far away.
Oh
when
my
I said
God.
I'm fine, I saw this video, and this guy probably seems like so stoned, and they said, "Do you know where Indiana is or something?" And he's like, "Indiana land," and they're like, "Dude, are you okay?" He's like, "I'm fine, glonky."
Oh,
And he's just like seems so stoned, but anyways, he's like, "I'm fine." Clearly, you didn't see the video; it didn't hit home, but whatever.
Yeah, I'm trying to be like, that was so funny. No, I get it. It's kind of funny. So, anyways, Becky the Daggers. She's like, "How dare you
not have seen all the videos I've seen online?"
Isn't that a classic case of us, though? You quote something that was so funny. I don't laugh because I haven't seen it. And
Or
you're
don't
just
get
left
it.
feeling alone or don't get it.
Yeah, where's
You
Dad
and
and
Craig
Axel when I
both.
freaking need them?
Yeah.
Like,
I live within a family of quoters.
Yeah.
And I am not one of them. So
She's
I'm
anti-quoter.
just constantly confused.
Yeah. Bev, though, what's funny, Bev will pull out a quote from, like, I don't know, like a movie no one has ever seen. And she'll be like, "Yeah, did you get it?" And we're all, like, standing there like crickets.
Yeah.
And she's like, I even said it right. But it never hits home. Like,
Never.
never. And it's so sad to watch.
I've accepted my role in the family.
What is your role in the family, Bev?
Slightly aloof. Things going over my head.
All the time.
Come back. It's gone.
It's gone. We're fly fishing and didn't catch a thing,
That's
says Bev.
right.
What's my role?
Peacemaker.
Yeah. The
Lover. Mitigator. Count on you for a laugh when I'm feeling upset.
That's right.
Yeah, you're just like, as we've said last week, a ray of fucking sunshine. Don't make fun of it. Okay? It came out. It happened. I said sunshine weird. No one cares.
I think the whole thing was a
Except
little
for
glonky.
you. Either way, you are.
Yeah. All right. Well, Bev, let's get into our case. Tell me what it's about.
Okay, I will. It is a fucked up case.
Yeah, it's actually really well known too.
Yeah. I
But-
personally did not know about it.
What?
So hopefully you guys haven't either. And it's shocking and thrilling to hear about because
Yeah.
it is. It's a little bit like I said, fucked up. So imagine a quiet, isolated house on the edge of town where a young girl is house sitting for her uncle and taking care of his pets. She invites her boyfriend over and the evening begins with dinner, movies, and the thrill of being alone together. But then the lights flicker, plunging the house into darkness. The dogs start growling, fixating on the basement door. Tension hangs in the air as what was meant to be a quiet, responsible weekend quickly transforms into a night of terror. This is the haunting story of Cassie Jo Stoddart, a bright, compassionate 16-year-old whose weekend of independence with her boyfriend turned into a real-life nightmare. What really lurked in that dark basement? And how did an innocent night at home become one of the most chilling true crime cases to shake the community of Pocatello, Idaho?
Welcome to Tales from the Chesterfield, the Canadian podcast about the world of true crime and haunted history. Join us, your hosts, Alicia and Kayla, every Tuesday as we explore the chilling and comedic side of Canada with no toonie left unturned. Grab your Timmies, cozy up on your Chesterfield, and let us be your passport to the captivating and the cryptic with a uniquely Canadian accent. Subscribe now everywhere you get your podcasts and don't miss a single story.
Cassie Jo Stoddart was born on December 21st, 1989 in Pocatello, Idaho. She was known for being kind, compassionate, responsible, and smart. And by 2006, Cassie was 16 years old and in the 11th grade at Pocatello High School, where she attended classes with her boyfriend, Matt Beckham. On the morning of September 22nd, everything started out like a typical Friday. Cassie's mother, Anna, dropped her off at school at 8 a.m. Cassie went through her regular schedule, geometry, Spanish, and then English. After school, Anna picked up both Cassie and Matt, taking them to Cassie's uncle's house in Whispering Cliffs. Cassie was looking after her uncle's 2 dogs and cats for the weekend, and this was a big deal for her since she'd be staying there alone. Anna had dropped them off around 5:30 p.m., and the young couple spent the evening making dinner and settling in to watch movies. They ended up watching Kill Bill 2. Around 9:30 p.m., Anna called to check in on Cassie, who reassured her mom that everything was going fine and that she'd call again in the morning. Shortly after that call, around 10 p.m., the power briefly went out. Although Cassie and Matt were a bit spooked, the lights quickly came back on, but then it happened again, and several more times after that. They knew the fuse box was in the basement, but when the dogs started growling and barking at the basement stairs, they both felt too uneasy to go check it out. And that's when the fear really began to settle in for them.
Yeah, no kidding. That would be the scariest thing. We've all seen the horror shows where the lights go out, and then everyone separates and someone gets murdered.
100%. That's always what happens. And then add the dogs barking.
Oh, God.
At the basement stairs where they know
that,
the fuse box is.
Yeah, we know animals have that, intuition.
Yeah. Why else would they be barking at the stairs,
Oh,
right?
God, I can't even handle, the fear that they probably actually felt.
Yeah.
Although it was oh, that's weird. But with the dogs growling, I'll probably shit my pants.
Yeah, I would probably call somebody, like my dad. I think I would. If I was too scared to go check out the basement myself, I think I would probably call someone to help.
Yeah.
I wouldn't just ignore it. With all those factors, contributing to the scenario, I would not be okay staying there by myself, probably.
God, no.
But as the night grew more unsettling, Matt was the one who became increasingly uneasy. He really felt that something wasn't right. He called his mom and asked if he could stay the night with Cassie. However, his mom wasn't on board with that idea and instead suggested that Cassie come over to their house. Now, Cassie, being responsible and dedicated, declined the offer. Over the phone, Matt's mom could hear Cassie explaining that she couldn't leave the animals. That was the whole reason she was staying at her uncle's house in the first place.
I mean, I get it. I really do. And Matt's mom, she probably thinks they're looking at, a little hanky-panky. She's like,
yeah, that's exactly it.
No. Oh, are the lights flickering? Get your ass home.
Yeah. That's obviously what she thinks. She's like, I need to be present if you guys are spending the night to make sure none of that crazy stuff goes on.
Yeah, we don't need no teen pregnancies.
Yeah, so we get it. The scenario makes sense right now.
Yeah.
And why she wants to be responsible and stay with her uncle. This is a chance to prove her independence and to prove that she's a responsible young woman. She's not just going to leave the dogs, right?
Yeah, why would you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after this phone call, it was only a matter of time before Matt's mom shows up. And around 10:30 p.m., she is there to pick him up. Despite his nervousness about leaving Cassie alone, he convinced himself that they were just spooked from being home alone. Still, that uneasy feeling lingered with him. And later, around 12:30 a.m., Matt tried calling Cassie again, but she didn't pick up. He figured it was late and she had probably fallen asleep, reassuring himself that he'd talk to her in the morning. But when the morning came, Matt's worry intensified. He still couldn't reach Cassie, and it turned out her mom was also having trouble getting in touch with her. Both of them assumed Cassie was just busy taking care of animals and would call back when she had a moment. With that thought in mind, everyone continued with their weekend plans. Matt decided to hang out with his friend Torey Adamcik, but that nagging sense of dread never quite left him. Sunday comes, and still, no one has heard from Cassie. But since she's supposed to be home later that day, everyone continues to assume that she's just busy with her responsibilities. When Cassie's uncle and his family return home that Sunday afternoon, they begin unpacking their things. Their 13-year-old daughter heads into the house ahead of them, only to be met with a scene straight out of a nightmare. She finds her cousin Cassie lying on the living room floor, surrounded by a large pool of blood. Terrified, she screams for her parents, who rush inside. What they see sends chills down their spines. Cassie, lifeless, cold to the touch, and clearly not breathing. Panicked, they immediately call 911. Law enforcement arrives within minutes, and the investigation begins. The scene is grim. Cassie's body is covered in stab wounds, some of which are clearly defensive, showing that she fought fiercely for her life. And as officers examine the house, they notice something chilling. There is no sign of forced entry. Someone got inside without breaking in, turning what should have been a safe home into a scene of horror. As the detectives search for the person who is responsible for this, they quickly hone in on Matt, Cassie's boyfriend, as he was the last person known to have seen her alive that Friday night. Naturally, he was the first person they wanted to interview. Matt seemed cooperative, recounting the events of the evening in detail. However, something felt off to the investigators. His demeanor was strangely unemotional and almost nonchalant for someone whose girlfriend had just been brutally murdered. Now, we have heard this a lot, right? Like in the podcast that we've done and the cases that we've covered, that officers often find the person that they're interviewing to be almost detached from the situation and just nonchalant, like
complete opposite of what they would expect someone who's dealing with this or getting news of a loved one or someone, you know, like it just seems opposite to what you'd expect someone to behave.
Exactly. So we kind of wanted to talk about this really quick because although it is cause for suspicion and can be unnerving to see someone act in that way, it is not
uncommon,
and it's not a representation of guilt. Because people sometimes appear nonchalant or unemotional when they hear tragic news for several reasons. Obviously, human reactions to shock and grief vary greatly, and not everyone processes trauma in the same way. So some of the reasons that you might seem just detached or indifferent in such situations are 1, shock and numbness. If you immediately hear something tragic or shocking, people can go into that emotional shock and cause them to feel numb or disconnected from those emotions that they're feeling at the time. And this can sometimes cause them to seem indifferent, even though they actually might internally be struggling to process what's happening.
And then number 2, cognitive dissonance. When something truly horrible happens, it can be really difficult for the brain to accept that it's real. The mind might protect itself by downplaying the gravity of the situation, leading to a response that seems casual or indifferent.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think another one would be like coping mechanisms, right? Like some people cope with tragedy by distancing themselves emotionally from what has happened, and it causes them to maybe react in like an unemotional way because they don't want to feel overwhelmed. Like if they let those emotions settle in, it could cause them to feel out of control, right?
Oh, for sure. Like I even feel it like just, you know, in normal life, if I'm like, let's say out in public and I'm having a confrontation with someone.
Yes.
Me personally, I probably would let that person just yell at me. And I'm just going to stand there like blank stare, just like, okay. But really internally, I'm fucking raging.
Yes.
You know, but I'm just so shocked that someone is like yelling at me and like confronting me that I would just like completely just like
shut
blank
down.
stare. Nothing is going to happen, you know?
Right.
I mean, when we're fighting, surely that doesn't happen. Maybe I feel more confident around you.
That's actually, I feel like you feel safe around me.
I do, so I can be like, bah!
Yeah, fuck off.
If I need to or want to.
Yeah, but especially when you're in a situation where police are interrogating you about something really tragic, like you might just be like, what the heck is happening? Shut down, and like not be able to do anything.
And it's intimidating.
Yes.
Like, look how many people get so weird just like getting pulled over for a traffic stop. Like I bawled my eyes out once for getting a ticket because my light was burnt out.
Oh my God.
I bawled my eyes out. I got like 4 other tickets, but that's a whole other story for another time. But I bawled my eyes out, Bevy, and I'm like, why am I crying? Like, I felt like such a freaking idiot.
Yeah, but you were like, this is like scary. Honestly, even sometimes when I would see cops, I'd be like,
don't arrest me.
But I'm
oh
like,
my God.
I'm literally looking at my speedometer. I'm like, I'm not doing anything wrong. But just like seeing them, you're like, what if something happens? Yeah, it's weird how that happens.
What if I break the law in this exact moment?
Yeah, what if I always kind of freeze up too? I'm like, are both my hands on the wheels? Am I looking like straight ahead?
Is my
And
seatbelt
I'm
on?
like,
Yes.
and I'm just like frozen, just so stiff, like act normal, act normal. It's like, but why do I have to tell myself to act normal? Like, I'm just being fine.
100%. I always like turn my music down. I mean,
Yeah.
I've said it before. I'm a chronic loud music listener in my car. Love rocking out driving. But every time I see them, even if it's not loud, I'm like, I'm going to turn that dial down.
Yeah.
I'm doing nothing possibly to get in trouble for.
Yeah. It's just
Perfect.
weird that happens.
Yeah. So
I get
given
it.
the gravity, understandable.
Yes. And then I think another one to mention is just personality differences. Some people naturally show less emotion, especially in stressful situations.
100%.
Lots of people process their feelings internally rather than outwardly displaying them, and that can sometimes lead to the perception of being uncaring or indifferent. I would say, honestly, Craig is a little bit like this, where he just naturally processes things internally.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you might feel like he doesn't care about what you're speaking about, but he is really like taking it to heart and really thinking about it in a meaningful way. But maybe initially that doesn't come across. So I can see that one too.
For sure.
And then one of the final ones that I think is important to mention is just social or cultural conditioning. You know, in some cultures or family wow.
Sorry, what?
Dynamics. Come on. Mouth, brain, work together. But some people are taught to suppress their emotions or maintain composure in the face of adversity. So they might just be conditioned to remain stoic, even though the situation is highly emotional.
Exactly. And then, you know, on top of that, there can be always a delayed response. It's like you don't really recognize like the severity or how tragic a situation is until later, right?
Like it sets in.
Yeah, like I've had that with coworkers who have passed away and you're like, oh my God, that's like so sad. Like, you know, but you're at work, your coworkers, although you built this terrific bond, but then you go home later and you start like thinking about what happened and then you have a complete breakdown. You're like, oh my God, that's so tragic, right?
Yes, this is funny because our dad recently moved to Lethbridge and we are very close to our dad.
Mm-hmm.
And it was definitely difficult for you and I. But initially when my dad told us the news, I reacted very strongly and very emotionally immediately. And Becky was very stoic. But then after he moved and like she kind of realized what it meant that he was in a different city,
gone.
You then had a stronger emotional reaction after the fact.
Yeah, like I think I was a little more emotional leading up to his move and then right after than you were.
Yeah, I like immediately processed it in epic, intense fashion.
Epic proportion.
And then I just was like, yeah, I accept it.
I'm good. But you know what? In my defense in that one,
Mm-hmm.
when Dad said, I have something to tell you, my initial response was, oh my God, you and your girlfriend are having a baby.
No way.
Yes, I don't know why that was my first. I mean, he had a smile on his face. Anyways, I am almost creeping up on mid-30s.
Yeah,
I did not want a baby sibling. I was just like prepared for the worst. And when he said, oh, we're moving Lethbridge, I'm like, oh, thank
God.
the fucking Lord. Because that is way better than a sibling at 34 years of age.
Yeah, that'd be weird.
A new sibling, yeah.
I mean, I would deal with it.
Of course.
But at the same time, you'd be like, this is a weird situation here.
Yeah, so honestly, I was just relieved at first. But then it fucking hit home later.
Yeah, it definitely did. So I think there's just so many elements and reasons why people have that response. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it is an indicator of guilt. Sometimes it 100% is, but not all the time.
Yeah, so let's say it's just not a fair assessment to someone's guilt.
Exactly. So when the investigators are seeing this, they're like, we definitely have to look into this kid and make sure that either we can take him off the suspect list or put him higher on the suspect list.
Yeah, one or the other.
And as Matt talked about that night, he suddenly recalled something important. 2 of their friends and classmates, Torey, Adamcik, and Brian Draper, had stopped by the house on Friday evening. According to Matt, the boys had come over to hang out for a bit and watch part of Kill Bill 2 with them before leaving. This new information raised red flags for investigators. Why hadn't Matt mentioned this detail earlier? And
I mean, it does seem like significant to the evening.
Yeah, like there was 2 other individuals in the home where someone died. I mean, yeah, why wouldn't you? But maybe he wasn't even like thinking about it, you know?
Yeah, like there are friends.
Yeah.
They left early.
And that's exactly kind of what Matt had said to the investigators when they asked him why he didn't mention it. He claimed he didn't think about it and he didn't think it was relevant since they had only stayed for about an hour. He even admitted that he had kind of forgotten they had even been there. Matt told investigators that Torey and Brian showed up at Cassie's uncle's house around 8:20 p.m. and left about an hour later, saying they were heading to a movie at the local theater. He also mentioned that while the boys were there, they seemed oddly interested in looking around the house, which struck him as strange but not concerning at the time. After Matt left Cassie that night, he even called Brian to see what they were up to. When Brian answered, he was whispering, leading Matt to assume they were in the movie theater, so he let them go without pressing further. This new revelation added an unexpected layer of suspicion, shifting the focus to Torey and Brian and leaving investigators with more questions than answers. However, Matt quickly found himself in a tough spot, being the last person with Cassie and with the circumstances of the evening being so strange. Naturally, the investigators zeroed in on him. When asked if he would be willing to take a polygraph test, Matt agreed without hesitation, scheduling it for the next day. Detectives also spoke with both Matt's and Cassie's mothers, and their accounts of the night aligned perfectly with Matt's story. And then when Matt took the polygraph test, he passed without any signs of deception. So with no evidence suggesting his involvement in Cassie's death, he was soon cleared as a suspect. So here we are, classic case of his nonchalant attitude not really meaning anything other than maybe he was in shock and suppressing his real emotions at the time.
Exactly.
However, the investigators were still interested in the strange power outages that Matt mentioned. They decided to check the fuse box for fingerprints, hoping it might lead them to whoever was responsible. To their surprise, they found a set of clear fingerprints and got an immediate match. The prints belonged to Victor, Cassie's mother's boyfriend. When questioned, Victor explained that he had been at the house before to fix a few things for Anna's brother, including checking the fuse box. His story checked out. Not only did the family confirm this, but Victor also had an alibi for the night of September 22nd. He was at the neighbor's house next door playing video games, and this was corroborated by both the neighbors and Anna, who confirmed the time he returned home. With everything adding up, Victor was quickly eliminated as a suspect, leaving investigators back to square one.
Square one. Could you imagine if he was the killer and his fingerprints were just like right there? I'd be like, wow, yeah, it didn't take us long. You dummy.
Yeah, dummy. You left your fingerprint at the scene.
Yeah. But now they have no one. No, that's not true. They don't have no one.
They don't have no one.
They got those 2 boys, but those fingerprints were useless.
But they're still at square one in terms of like figuring out who did this. Like they don't have like all of their suspicions and all of their leads so far have been
cleared.
So
on to the next.
Yes. And the next was Torey and Brian. They wasted no time in contacting both boys to get their side of the story. However, getting a hold of Torey Adamcik proved challenging. He was difficult to reach and seemed reluctant to cooperate, refusing to come in for an interview. Torey, what's going on with that? However, on the other hand, Brian Draper agreed to speak with detectives with permission from his parents. Now, during the initial interview, Brian echoed Matt's version of events. He claimed they arrived at Cassie's uncle's house around 8:20 p.m., stayed for about an hour, and then left to watch the movie Pulse at a local theater. But when detectives asked Brian to describe the movie, he stumbled. He couldn't provide any details.
Ooh.
And of course, this inconsistency immediately raised red flags, making investigators even more suspicious of Brian.
Yeah, they're like, you just saw it. How do you not know?
Yeah. Bet you Brian was not expecting that question to be asked. I was thinking as I was reading this, Becky, I was like, are we going to go on to another thing? Like, hey, criminals, if you're going to give an alibi, you better make sure you have, like,
the details
of your alibi covered. Like, you should know the storyline.
Yeah, like, if you're in the movie, air quotes, if you're in the movie, know what the movie's about.
Yeah.
Maybe watch it in the 2 days that no one knew she was dead.
However, that being said, obviously, if he did know, investigators are obviously going to check his alibi.
For sure.
And if he wasn't there, they will find out either way. But
Either
still,
way.
I was like, classic criminals put under pressure and just,
Didn't think it through.
Sensing something was off, detectives brought Brian back in for further questioning the next day. It didn't take long for the pressure to get to him. Brian broke down and confessed that he and Torey hadn't gone to the movies at all.
Shocker.
He admitted he lied because he was scared and didn't want to get in trouble. This revelation completely shifted the focus of the investigation, exposing the dark that was lurking beneath the surface. Because Brian's story then took a dark turn as he opened up to investigators. He explained that after he and Torey left Cassie's house around 9:20 p.m., they didn't actually leave the area. Instead, they parked down the street and waited. At around 10:15 p.m., they called Matt. But Brian struggled to remember the exact timing, correcting himself several times. Eventually, he settled on the idea that they called Matt around 9:40 p.m. to discuss a plan about burglarizing cars. Matt told them he'd think about it and get back to them. However, after not hearing back, the boys called Matt again around 10:15 p.m., and he said he still wasn't sure and needed to check with his mom about staying out longer. Their final call to Matt was somewhere between 10:20 and 10:30 p.m., where Matt confirmed that he couldn't join them because his mom was already on her way to pick him up. With Matt out of the picture, Brian claimed that he and Torey decided to go on their own. They supposedly went to a neighborhood near Torey's house and looked for cars to burglarize. When detectives asked if they stole anything, Brian's story got a little shaky. He said they didn't find anything of value and wore soccer gloves, so there wouldn't be any evidence.
Oh, yeah, because the detectives are like, okay, if truly you went out burglarizing, one, that's the least of our worries.
Yeah, of course.
In the grand scheme of things here. But two, let's make sure we can prove that you were burglarizing these vehicles. Like, did you take anything? No. Okay, so there's zero evidence that you were anywhere burglarizing cars. Cool.
Yeah.
Glad to know it.
Exactly. So the detectives were skeptical and felt Brian was stalling or giving them a runaround. They pushed him to come clean, saying they could help him if he told the truth. But Brian stuck to his story. While detectives were still suspicious, they asked Brian to come in the next day for a polygraph test, which he agreed to. Meanwhile, they also managed to get Torey to agree to come in with his parents for questioning shortly after Brian's scheduled polygraph. But when Brian showed up the following day with his parents, he stuns investigators by requesting to speak with them before taking the test. And in a dramatic shift, Brian admitted that he was there when Cassie died. However, he insisted that the original plan was just to scare her as a prank. It was never supposed to go beyond that. Brian then revealed that after leaving Cassie and Matt that night, he and Torey waited at Torey's house before eventually deciding to return to Cassie's. When they first visited earlier that evening, they had unlocked the basement door so they could sneak back in later, which explains why there was no forced entry.
Exactly. What? Like, this is all in the sake of a prank.
Apparently, yeah. That's like a fucked up prank. Like, who would do that to their friends, right?
Honestly, if someone, like, found a way into my house and fucked with a fuse box just to fucking scare me.
Friends off.
Friends off. That's not a funny prank.
No.
Because, like, I like, the amount of fear, like, that would linger with me.
For a long time,
yeah,
right?
even if it was just a prank, like, it's not even funny.
No, it's not at all.
Little psychos.
Yeah. So they said, Brian said once they were inside, that's when they started their twisted plan by messing with the fuse box, turning the power on and off to scare Cassie. They toyed with her for a while, eventually shutting off the lights completely and creeping upstairs.
No,
I
thank
can't.
you.
No, thank you.
Friends
Terrifying.
off, for sure.
To further frighten her, they slammed a closet door near the top of the stairs. Cassie, who was laying on the couch, shouted out, "Who's there?" Ugh. Now, Brian's chilling confession was just the beginning, but the detectives now realized they were dealing with something far more sinister than a harmless prank. Clearly, they have someone who is dead. Like,
something went wrong.
Yeah. And in a shocking revelation, Brian told investigators that as he and Torey returned to Cassie's house, things did take a horrifying turn. Brian recounted that once they were back inside, Torey went after Cassie with a knife, and that he watched in horror as Torey began stabbing her repeatedly, saying that Cassie fell to the ground and Torey, showing no remorse, continued the attack, insisting that they had to kill her. Brian said he was stunned and horrified, shouting at Torey, questioning what he was doing, but that Torey was relentless. And after the brutal attack, the two of them went back downstairs, turned the power back on, and then left the house. They proceeded to dispose of evidence in a remote area outside of town. With this intense confession and the new information, investigators were able to piece together the grim details of what had really happened. They immediately went to speak with Torey. And initially, Torey repeated the same fabricated story about car burglaries that Brian had told. However, when confronted with Brian's confession, Torey's demeanor changed. He requested a lawyer and ended the interview abruptly.
I mean, that is smart. If you're being accused of a major crime, really any crime, get a lawyer.
That is what you should do.
Anyone, guilty or not, get a lawyer.
Yeah.
Donut.
Donut.
Do not incriminate yourself.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I agree with that. That's what you have to do. Especially, we just heard Brian's confession.
Yes.
Like, he's putting it all on Torey.
Yeah, he needs a lawyer.
He's like, I was shocked. I was just doing a prank.
Wow.
My guy Torey all of a sudden just murdered this girl.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God.
I'm thinking lights on, lights off. That's it.
Like, what? So,
get a lawyer.
Yeah, he's like, holy crap. However, him choosing to get a lawyer and stop speaking to investigators did not deter them. They informed Torey and his father that they had search warrants for Torey and Brian's homes as well as Torey's car. So despite the request for a lawyer, the evidence that they found was overwhelming. Investigators had enough to arrest both Brian and Torey on the spot. The true extent of their involvement in the heinous crime had been uncovered, leading to their immediate apprehension.
I'm kind of wondering about that last statement because it's like the true extent of their involvement.
Yeah, what was it?
We still don't actually know. We know that they're involved.
Yeah, we know that Torey has at least been accused by his friend of savagely murdering Cassie.
Yeah.
Right? But what does the evidence say? And why are they both apprehended? I know that, like, even if you're guilty by association, you would get apprehended, but I am curious to know if there was anything more. / excited to tell you that there is more because I already know the outcome. So on September 29th, it was just 7 days after the myrtle. Guys, it says brutal murder. So I merged the two.
Myrtle.
Just 7 days after the brutal murder. It was close. Brian agreed to lead investigators to where they had buried the evidence. He took them to a remote location on Black Canyon Road, approximately 8 miles from Pocatello. There, investigators unearthed a troubling collection of items. A videotape, gloves, a note written by Torey, blood-stained clothing, a hunting knife, and a dagger. And what was great about these findings is that although the boys had attempted to burn the evidence, their efforts were only partially successful.
They only did a semi-good job at burning them.
Exactly. And what it left in its wake was that the videotape was damaged, but it was not completely destroyed. So the tape was sent off to a specialist in hopes that the footage could be partially recovered.
Like, what the F is on that videotape?
And also, if Brian had more to do with this crime than he's letting on, I'm sure that he thought that the evidence was burned.
Yeah, he's probably like, I can tell them kind of whatever narrative
I want
in like that realm.
Yeah.
To minimize my involvement in this. He's
totally.
Like, ha ha ha, because we burned the evidence.
We've burnt the evidence, so they will never know.
Yes.
So the investigators are at the point where they're waiting for some of that video evidence to come back. And so they start digging into the backgrounds of Torey and Brian. They discovered that both boys were considered social outcasts at school. They had a small circle of friends that included Cassie, Matt, and a few others. Brian, who had struggled with a stutter as a young teenager, felt like an outsider and found solace in online chat rooms that were obsessed with the Columbine school shooting.
And let's be clear, what a wild, dumb statement. Find solace in an online chat room that were obsessed with Columbine school shootings.
Yeah, that's wild. Like, why would you find solace in that?
Like,
right?
Go find solace in baseball, soccer.
I understand the
friends,
community
music.
sense. Like, if you are a loner, but you find conversation with people in general, you may feel a sense of community. But, like, to the average Joe. Yeah, what the fuck? Right?
You know, like, pick up an instrument. Find solace in that.
Yeah. Like you said,
Learn
join
how
a
to
soccer team.
Learn how to do art. You know, go dig a hole or something. No, that's bad, actually. Don't dig a hole because you can bury your evidence and are a human. Don't do that, fucking Brian, you loser. God, Becky, why was that an option? Yeah, I was thinking of, like, you know, the movie Hole, like, dig a hole.
Dig it. Dig it on, yeah.
You know,
it
it came from a real place
of, yeah, I know, I get what you're saying, where they went and they, yes.
Yeah, anyways, but, like, what a dumb statement.
Yeah, I don't enjoy that. That's kind of fucked up. It kind of sets the tone for where his mind is at, right? If you can find solace in a group with that nature, that's kind of
messed up.
It's totally messed up.
Yeah, and an interesting point as well, Bev, is when you watch Brian's interview, speaking of his stutter, it almost, like, under that pressure, it kind of comes back. At first, I thought he was just, like, struggling to, like, get his words out because he's like, oh my God, I just watched this girl die.
Right.
But then as it keeps going, you're like, oh no, your stutter came back. Oh.
Yeah, like the pressure just, like, got to him.
Yeah,
and he reverted back to
his stuttering ways.
Wow, that is kind of interesting.
It is.
I could see how that would happen, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know much about stuttering, but I'm sure, like, anxiety, increased heart rate would just contributes to it in general.
Oh, for sure. I mean, when you get a little excited, watch out. You didn't even have a stutter and you started stuttering.
Yeah.
You know?
Actually, funny little story. When we were doing the recording, and it says detectives began digging into the backgrounds of Torey and Brian, I was like, detectives began digging. And
then we start talking about his stutter.
And then we really had to try our best not to burst out laughing, solely because the timing was just truly impeccable. It was like moments before we spoke about his stutter that I was stuttering. But yeah, so that is kind of interesting to hear about.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, the part that we just don't get is that these forums truly did provide him with a sense of belonging that he hadn't felt elsewhere.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes that does, like you said, it does speak volumes. Like, everyone needs to feel a sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's good, but it's still messed up with the, like, the
content.
commonality and the content. And what's even interesting is Brian is a bit of an outcast, but so is Torey, right? And he also finds a deep fascination with, like, horror films and in that community as well. So we're looking at both of them, and they kind of have a bit of an unhealthy obsession.
Yeah, and they quickly bond over these, like, weird shared interests, right?
And they start engaging in each other's obsession. Like, you know, they both start getting into horror films and stuff like that.
Torey obviously introduced Brian to the world of horror, and that whole shared interest thing, like, cements their connection.
Yeah. It said, actually, one of Torey's favorite horror movies was Scream.
Oh.
Which is really creepy.
Yeah, well, that is really creepy, considering how this case went down, right? It's almost like he is living out his Scream fantasy.
Exactly.
Ugh, that's eerie, Becky.
But then down the road, they found a new sense of belonging.
With each other, right?
With each other, and as they go into high school, they meet Cassie and Matt, who befriended them.
And they just accept them for who they are.
Yeah.
So obviously this, like, sense of camaraderie between all of them was rare for Torey and Brian and was precious for both of them. Yeah. Which just makes the ultimate betrayal that occurs of their friends even more disturbing.
Yes, it does.
So not long after their interview with Torey, detectives received a crucial update. The specialist had managed to repair and view the damaged videotape. What they uncovered was truly horrifying. The tape begins with footage of Cassie at school on the morning of September 22nd, around 8:30 a.m. Brian was filming her, asking her if she had seen Torey yet because he was late. The scene then shifted to Brian and Torey skipping fourth period, hanging out in the library, and creating a death list of their classmates. In a chilling segment, the video showed Brian and Torey apologizing to Cassie's family for their plans to kill her. They described it as a crime of opportunity, revealing that Cassie was chosen because she would be home alone, which is an ideal target.
Well, exactly. And what's so creepy about this, Bev, is they actually allude to the fact that they had made previous plans earlier on, like not in the week, but like over like the last month or so. I don't know the exact time frame, but it was alluding to the fact that they had other victims in mind,
Mm-hmm.
but the opportunity either was missed or there was a change of plans and it didn't pan out, so they had no one to kill at that time.
Yeah.
And now they thought they had this perfect opportunity because Cassie's going to be home alone.
Right. And none of the other victims that they wanted to kill were alone in their previous, like, attempts or planning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously after detectives watch these videos, it's clear that these guys' motives for killing in general was sheer thrill and malice. They had no personal vendetta against Cassie at all. In fact, she was their friend. She accepted them, and that meant a lot to them, kind of, in their own weird, twisted sense, because why the hell would they kill someone who accepted them for who they were? Like, that's just so terrible.
It is.
And obviously, another thing that is crucial in these videotapes is that Brian was clearly attempting to downplay his role. And this was exposed through these videotapes.
Yeah, like this was no accident. It wasn't that Torey just out of nowhere decided to kill Cassie. They planned this.
Yeah, it was a mutual decision between them both.
Liar, liar, pants on effing fire.
Yeah, 100%. Which is, I mean, if you're the first person to speak and you were a part of this heinous crime, do I blame him for trying to downplay his involvement? No, because he knows what his future is going to be like. That being said...
And he also assumes that these tapes are destroyed
beyond
recognition, right?
Yeah. He underestimates or he overestimated his ability to hide evidence.
Exactly.
Classic criminal. Just saying. So, I mean, the tape doesn't stop there either, which is terrible.
Yeah.
The tape continues with Brian and Torey after leaving Cassie's house, recording another video in Torey's car.
Right. And this was the moment when Cassie and Matt thought they were going to see a movie.
Yes, exactly. So they did leave the house after they had already unlocked the basement door.
Mm-hmm.
And they discussed their plans, noting, in quotes, "Unfortunately, we have the grueling task of killing our two friends. They are right in a house down the street." And then, end of quote. They then detailed their next steps. I can't with myself sometimes. So their next steps were sneaking back into the house through the basement while wearing masks and gloves and carrying knives. And if you remember, there were two weapons, the hunting knife and the dagger. Inside, they tampered with the fuse box, turning the electricity off and on in an attempt to lure Cassie and Matt to the basement. When that failed, they waited in the basement until Matt left. Torey then shut off the power again, and they proceeded upstairs to surprise attack Cassie. The tape made it clear that if Matt had been there, he too would have been murdered.
How lucky was
for
Matt?
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
Also,
thank God for his mom being like paranoid about sex.
Oh, thank God, because it saved his life.
Yeah, it did ultimately.
But I do wonder because, like, although two male teens against one female teen, they have the upper hand. If Matt had been there, who knows what could have happened? Maybe they would have been successful in their kill. But also, maybe they could have got their ass whooped.
Maybe, but it is two adolescent males
with knives
against
unsuspecting victims.
Yeah,
they have the surprise factor, which is
never good. Then they also just have the upper hand in terms of holding weapons.
And when they turn the lights off,
like, God. So I don't know that it would have been a good outcome in the sense that Matt and Cassie could have lived. I think it was almost a godsend that Matt wasn't there.
A bit of a divine intervention for Matt, at least.
For Matt, at least, yeah.
I mean,
rest in peace, Cassie. I am very
sorry
that happened to you, and I'm sorry to her family because it's just absolutely diabolical. Obviously, this disturbing footage paints the clear picture that this crime was 100% premeditated. It exposed the full extent of both Brian and Torey's chilling plan and their complete lack of remorse for their actions.
Yeah, this was just like a fun Friday for them when you can go and watch these tapes and it is absolutely horrifying to watch because they're just like having a great time.
Yeah.
That's the worst part, right?
Yeah, like it's not like they're not even like scared trying to cover up their tracks immediately. Like No. In fact, after they kill Cassie, they make one more final video. Obviously, the adrenaline was palpable in this video. Their voices were laced with a disturbing excitement. And they proudly declared, "We just murdered Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a fucking joke." Their exhilaration was evident as they drove to a convenience store purchasing matches and hydrogen peroxide. They then headed to Black Rock Canyon to burn their masks, clothes, gloves, weapons, and the videotape, further trying to destroy the evidence of their heinous crime. In their video, they did express their shock and urgency, admitting to each other that they needed to get their story straight. But still, it's like, obviously, like, them choosing to make a one last final video of that just shows that they were enjoying this moment.
Yeah, they were in it for the thrill of it.
Yeah, it's
which,
really
might
sick.
I add, is the worst type of criminal.
Yeah.
Because I'm not saying that any crime is a good crime.
Yeah.
And realistically, whatever justification you had for killing someone, it's irrelevant. You're still a terrible human
for doing it. Yeah.
However, just being a human, you can empathize with human emotion and how
a loss of control, a bad decision in the moment
can happen, right? Or even a jealous rage, like all those emotions can take over.
Yeah.
And have or result in a murder, right?
Yeah.
But when you have someone who's just like, all right, who's our next victim? Oh, we can kill you because you're home alone. Like, that is the worst.
Or like, haha, we just killed Cassie.
Yeah,
like that
I am
kind of
high
shit.
on life. No, they're the worst type of criminal, and they deserve all the punishment and consequences that they get. All of it. I have zero empathy
for someone who has lack of remorse for doing something heinous, right? Like, how can you?
Yep.
And the great thing about this case is that they are going to get what's coming to them because the evidence was damning. With their confessions, the incriminating videos, and the disturbing kill list discovered during the search warrants, investigators had more than enough to charge both Torey and Brian with first-degree murder. And despite their youth, both being just 16 years old at the time, both boys were tried as adults.
And so they should be.
Yeah. And during their separate trials, each tried to shift the blame onto the other, claiming the other was the mastermind behind the crime. As the trials unfolded, detectives uncovered that Torey and Brian had created a 12-person kill list and had planned to recreate the Columbine shooting at their school after murdering Cassie. So what I find, like, that's disgusting, number one. But also I find it kind of interesting how their interests really did amalgamate into sick and twisted plans. Like, we have Torey, who is obsessed with horror films, loved Scream. They lived that out. Brian, who found solace in a online chat about the Columbine shooting, were wanting to recreate that. Like, it's very weird how both of them took their different, like, interests and truly did create, like, the most disturbing plans that included both of their interests or whatever, right? Isn't that
is wild.
Weird?
Well, and especially growing up, we always heard, like, don't let your kids play violent video games. Don't let them watch Harry Potter.
Yeah. We did hear that in church.
Yeah, we did. But, people are so worried with those influences, and it's like, because of shit like this.
Exactly.
It's like they became obsessed with it, and then look what they fucking did.
Yeah, totally.
I can see how people who then translate it to, like, don't let your kids play those games, Grand Theft Auto. I can see how those fears were real.
I can see it too.
People, right?
I think sometimes if people, like, there's obviously there's got to be this perfect, like, recipe for the disaster, I think. Like, we have loners who aren't accepted into society or into, like, the social atmosphere of their schooling. They seek out belonging and solace in not so great things. Then they meet each other. Like, there's this, like, perfect recipe for disaster that's brewing. It's not like everyone who watches horror movies
is going to do this.
But
this is more of the one-off, right?
Yeah, but
it's like the perfect storm.
Exactly. It does happen. And I get why it's like, if I would, you just got to be careful what people are consuming on the interweb, because it can influence their decision making and their perception of the world around them. That's just it. So in 2007, both Torey and Brian were found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They are currently serving their sentences at the Idaho State Correctional Institution. And since their convictions, both men have repeatedly appealed their sentences, but each appeal has been denied.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah.
And obviously this was such a brutal case, but I realized I forgot to mention just how brutal it was besides the planning. But Cassie actually had close to 30 stab wounds. In one article, I read that she had lost a finger, but I didn't read that anywhere else. So do not quote me on that, but just to point out how brutal and how hard she fought, there was close to 30 stab wounds, and the coroner actually reported that there were 2 different types of wounds. One was like with a serrated blade.
Hunting knife.
Exactly. And then smooth edges, the dagger.
Yeah.
So if there was any question that either one of them was more responsible or the other, no. They were
both viciously attacked her.
Yeah, and this girl suffered, and at least 12 of those 30 wounds were fatal.
Wow.
So, like, it was overkill. These guys were brutal. They should never be let out of prison. And that's why I say no shit, their appeal was denied, because they're bad people. They shouldn't be let out.
No, absolutely not. The chance of them doing again is so high, right? Especially because of the reason. They're just doing it for fun and for the thrill. Like, I doubt that they would just not continue on that path. Yeah. Obviously, the tragic reality of this case is that Cassie was this kind and compassionate person who befriended Torey and Brian. And in the end, they just viewed her as disposable. This is a stark contrast to the genuine friendship and warmth that she extended to them. Her story is just this haunting reminder of how trust and kindness can be betrayed in the most unimaginable ways. And unfortunately, this type of evil exists. But I think what is nice to know is that Cassie herself was this wonderful person. And I think that is exactly how she should be remembered.
Oh, hands down.
Well, Becky, this is the sad case of Cassie Jo Stoddart. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for sharing.
And just your weekly reminder to download our weekly episodes, follow us on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, and give us a follow on our social medias. You can find us at Luminol on the Wall. Can't wait till next week.